welcome everybody to our presentation of unlocking public sector opportunities for scale-up success. Definitely want to thank the folks from ScaleUp for inviting us along. For those who don't know me, my name is Chris Duncan. I am an outreach specialist here in the Western region for Public Service and Procurement Canada. And I'm going to spend the next 15, 20 minutes kind of giving you a bit of a teaser on what doing business with the government of Canada is like. So for the companies who are out there who are, maybe thinking about potentially, approaching the federal government as a potential client, I'm hoping to give you a little bit of information to kind of load you up so you know where to go, some of the tools that you can look into, and we're going to take some time to look at some of the myths that surround some government contracting. So really looking forward to going through this with you today. I've got a colleague of mine here as well today. So Barry Payne is here with us today. He's going to take over about halfway through and tell you his story of, starting off as a supplier to the government of Canada and eventually moving over and helping us out over in Procurement Assistance Canada. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. So just bear with me here for a moment. And if somebody can let me know once we see it, that would be great. We're good. Awesome. Thank you, Barry. All right. So unlocking public sector opportunities for scale-up success. Like I said, this is mostly for folks who, maybe don't have a whole lot of experience in government contracting, or we're looking into the potential of doing business with the government and not really sure on where to start. So starting off, like I mentioned, I'm with Procurement Assistance Canada, and we're actually part of Public Service and Procurement Canada. So we're here to actually help smaller and diverse businesses try to understand the federal procurement process. So we engage with businesses to assist and inform them on how to sell their goods and services to the government of Canada. And then, of course, we also work to reduce the barriers in an effort to ensure fairness and inclusion in the process. We're also here to look for opportunities to increase the participation of diverse businesses in federal procurement. And we do this by engaging with diverse communities, listening to concerns, answering questions, helping businesses understand the procurement process, and finally, helping them define those opportunities. Okay, we're also partnering with community organizations, and we do offer specific help and instruction to assist those specific business needs in those associations. But really, let's get into some, really important information. Let's talk about how much the government actually buys. So the government of Canada is one of the largest buyers of goods and services. And each year, the government of Canada spends billions of dollars. We award hundreds of thousands of contracts, and we make well over 1 million direct credit card purchases. So, as a matter of fact, last year, the federal government spent roughly $37 billion on goods and services. As the central purchaser for the government of Canada, PSPC manages the procurement of goods and services, including construction services, at roughly $27 billion out of that $37 billion. Okay? And on top of that, of course, we make roughly 500,000 purchase contracts a year and do close to 2 million credit card transactions. Okay? So maybe you think you're too small to compete for all of that business. And if you're talking about some of the small percentage of contracts for the really big ticket items that are out there that you hear about in the media all the time, then maybe you're right about those. It's only a few companies out there that we can buy fighter jets from or warships, things like that. But in reality, the majority of the contracts awarded by the government of Canada are actually valued under $25,000. And almost all of the credit card purchases that we do are direct purchases from vendors under $10,000. And of course, smaller Canadian companies are well positioned to take advantage of these types of contracts. And obviously, these types of contracts are the majority of the goods and services that the government of Canada buys every year. Maybe you think the government of Canada only does business with large corporations. when in truth, on average, the government of Canada actually buys more goods and services from micro, small, and medium enterprises than it does from large companies. Small companies vastly outnumber large corporations, and their competitive edge comes from offering a wider range of specialized products and services and from being local and innovative. And of course, speaking about being innovative, the federal government has a number of innovation programs like those offered by Innovative Solutions Canada that allow startups to sell new products directly to the government of Canada. They get their first sale and the government gets to try out the cool new tech and other innovative products before anybody else. Maybe you think the government doesn't buy from businesses like yours. The government's actually been working to make it easier for all kinds of suppliers to do business with the federal government, including those that have little to no experience with the process. Okay? We're doing our best to make procurement processes easier, faster, and more accessible so that they're less burdensome for businesses. We've been experimenting with pilot projects to increase opportunities for businesses run by groups that haven't sold as much to government in the past, like businesses owned by women, visible minorities, or persons with disabilities. And we're encouraging departments to find ways to increase the value of contracts awarded to Indigenous businesses. We're expanding opportunities for green goods and services by making environmentally friendly purchasing a focus. You'll often hear about green procurement in a lot of the new and upcoming procurement opportunities that are out there. Maybe you think the government doesn't buy what you sell. So what does the government of Canada buy? Like I mentioned, of course, we buy military equipment, we buy icebreakers, computers, software, office supplies, but really that's just the tip of the iceberg. We also buy food, training services, exercise equipment, plumbing supplies, golf carts, bicycles. We buy so much more. My personal experience with procurement, I've been doing procurement since 2014 with the Department of National Defense. And a lot of our procurement at D&D is what you would expect to need in a town. A military base is a small town. So we literally buy everything that you can think of within the Department of National Defense. There is such a wide range of the equipment and things that we need. And there's all sorts of businesses out there that can help supply those goods and services. Maybe you think, the government procurement is difficult and time consuming. In the past, that's absolutely true. In fact, when I started in 2014, the amount of change that has gone into the procurement process to make it easier is just astronomical. There are a lot of rules and there are a lot of policies that do have to be followed in government procurement, but we are trying to make it easier. Real progress has been made to try to improve your experience as a supplier and to encourage you to participate. Some of the big improvements so far include being able to submit bids electronically for some contracts. Prior to COVID, for example, you couldn't submit things, or it would be rare to be able to submit things electronically. We're also focusing on making sure companies get paid faster. And in fact, we're trying out an initiative to get invoices to be paid within 15 days. There are other improvements ahead to make things easier and faster for suppliers to do business with the government of Canada. So, for example, our contract paperwork is being simplified, and all of our procurement is moving on online through the Canada Buys website. Let's talk about some of that competitive procurement here for a second. So here's just a really quick overview of how the procurement process works. So for the purchase of goods over $25,000 and purchase of services over $40,000, government generally issues a public notice. Okay, we'll put these tender notices on what we call our government electronic tendering service, which we'll get to here in a second. But this formal process is designed to ensure open, fair, and transparent competition for government contracts. Basically, the government lays all of its cards on the table by publishing a document that clearly outlines who has a requirement, what it is that they require, where and when the goods or services are going to be delivered, and how they're going to pick a winner through the process. And anyone capable of delivering on the requirement and willing to take the time to prepare a bid has a fair shot at winning that contract. But let's talk about low dollar value procurement for a second, because this is really a great opportunity for some of the smaller and medium-sized enterprises to really start to get their feet wet with federal procurement. So those purchases below $25,000 for goods and below $40,000 for services are considered to be low dollar value procurements. And unlike larger procurements that are done through the solicitation of bids and quotes from potential suppliers using the tendering process on Canada Buys, low dollar value procurements are often direct purchases from vendors. Low dollar value procurement can present an opportunity to grow your business by developing a business relationship with the Government of Canada through smaller contracts. Government buyers, such as myself when I was at D&D, we often use source lists or even our professional networks to find suppliers for low dollar value procurements on a competitive or non-competitive basis. And registering in government supplier databases can help buyers for your business or find your business when they're looking for specific requirements. Just a bit of a tip when you're signing up for these systems. So provide as much information as you can about your business, including the commodities you sell and the socioeconomic profile of your business. This will help buyers identify your business as a potential supplier, and you may benefit from procurement initiatives that aim to increase the supplier diversity. You can register in a lot of these systems through the Canada Buys website. We have a little section up at the top that says Getting Started that links you to all of these different databases, including the Indigenous Business Directory. Okay, so if you're an Indigenous business, make sure you're signed up on the IBD so that you qualify for the set aside for Indigenous businesses. It's really important as a potential supplier to build out your network. Generally, you can market your business directly to buyers. Most folks don't realize that you can absolutely reach out directly to the buyers. In most cases, government buyers can engage directly with the low dollar value procurement. Above the low dollar value thresholds, goods are purchased through that competitive process on Canada Buys. It can be helpful for your business to strategically connect with officials in departments and agencies to learn about what directions their departments may be proceeding. Most purchases over these thresholds are managed through PSPC. So again, if you get the opportunity to connect with PSPC through their contracting authorities, you can promote your particular good or service. Just remember that it's a competitive market and you'll want to distinguish yourself from all of the other suppliers who are doing business with the government. So how can you find out if selling to the government is right for you? So first of all, you're going to want to go to the Canada Buys website, and this is where you're going to find our government electronic tendering service. PSPC, as well as other departments and agencies, do use this service for those purchases above those low dollar value thresholds. You don't have to register to use Canada Buys in order to search through the website. You can actually search, obviously using keywords, like you would a Google search, but you can also search if you happen to know what your goods and services identification number for your commodities might be, or if you know your United Nations Standardized Products and Services Code. All of these are different ways that you can use the government electronic tendering service to find opportunities. You can also use the website to find previous contract notices, which might give you a bit of an idea of what buyers have bought in the past and can be useful for you to develop a business strategy. You can also subscribe to notifications for when new opportunities are published, so that way you put the website to work for you rather than having to come back and look all the time. Canada Buys is the single window for businesses to view bidding opportunities across federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments, as well as administrative institutions such as schools and hospitals. And you can use the Canada Buys website to search the GETS system for public sector tenders and contract history. And you may see other tender opportunities that require some electronic bidding. These opportunities will actually direct you to register for an SAP Ariba account if you don't have one already. This will be the account that you'll use to submit your bids for Government of Canada contracts on the website. For other tenders, you may need to be registered in the Supplier Registration Information System, and you'll need to have a procurement business number. All of these different registration sessions are on the part of the website that's called Getting Started. Lots of great information there to help you sign up for all of these. Okay, so once you complete your business profile on the SAP Ariba platform, and you provide as much information as you can about your business, you'll get an opportunity to self-identify the socioeconomic profile of your business, and this will help the buyers identify your business as a potential supplier. The Canada Buys Service Desk is there to help you with using the website and the SAP Ariba platform. If you go to the support section of the Canada Buys website, that's where you can contact the service desk by phone, email, or chat. And it also provides you with a number of self-serve resources and step-by-step guides if you are having trouble. But if you are having any sorts of issues with federal procurement, or you've got questions, you don't know where to turn to, please reach out to us at Procurement Assistance Canada. Okay, we offer seminars, webinars, and one-on-one sessions. Personally, myself, my favorite thing to do are the one-on-one sessions where we get an opportunity to really deep dive into your business and provide some real personalized support. If one of us aren't available, you can always reach out to our 1-800 info line and get an opportunity to speak with somebody in PAC. And our website also includes a number of self-service tools, again, just to help guide you through the process. Okay, so what are some of the next steps if you're interested in doing business with the federal government? You'll want to take a look at our website, so canada.ca/PAC, just to see how we can help your business. Our website lists all the services and self-serve resources, and it's really important to note that all of the services offered by Procurement Assistance Canada are 100% free. Okay, so hopefully that's kind of provided a little bit of information on the government procurement process. I'm going to throw it over to Barry here in a moment. I just wanted to mention that, with both of us here, we're happy to answer your questions here today. Hopefully, at the end of the session, we'll have a few minutes left over. But if not, I'm going to put my my email address in the chat. Please feel free to reach out to me at any time. I'm going to put a bit more contact info for you there as well. And yeah, I'm going to throw it over to Barry to introduce himself and tell us a little bit about his journey as a supplier. Barry.
Great, thanks, Chris. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Barry Payne, and I'm an Indigenous supplier. I'm actually coming to you today from Hiawatha First Nation near Peterborough, Ontario. And I love getting an opportunity to chat with folks like yourselves because I, like you, I actually sat in that chair for many, many years. I started out my journey selling to the federal government, way back, I'm going to say around 1999, 2000. So I've been around a long time, actually back before computers, because people always ask me how I actually chose the name Adirondack. That was the company I started out with. And essentially it's because government supply lists at the time, and still are in some ways, they're alphabetical. And back then it was all printed. So there was no electronic means. And so you definitely wanted to be at the top or the first few pages, or they'd never ever find you when they went looking for you. I myself started out really out of the trunk of my car. I drove back and forth to Ottawa for a couple of years. It was about 4 hours back then. And one of the things I noticed, and one of the things I like to talk to people about that, I kind of noticed over a period of time, was there's a real methodology to marketing to the federal government. And I'm glad Chris actually he reinforced what I always say to people, and crawl, walk, run is my whole kind of philosophy to the federal government. The crawl to me is low dollar value. The walk is getting on a supply arrangement or a standing offer, and the run is RFPs. Because since I came to the government about 2 years ago, actually I came for a 90 days beta or a pilot project 2 years ago, and I'm still here. So must be doing something right. But when you think of the government, it's no different than any other market or the private sector, except that I like to impress upon people that in the real world we call it cold calling. In the government, when you reach out to somebody on the procurement side, it's actually a warm call, because most folks or most procurement people are looking for new suppliers and new folks always to work with. And so that's why I always kind of say it's an easier market to get into if you're starting out. going back to the crawl, walk, run philosophy, I talked about the crawl is, I call it getting off the bench and getting into the game. What's the easiest way to do that? Low dollar value. And low dollar value is got a lot more what I call opportunity to it than it just seems like. Because at low dollar value, Chris touched on the fact that a buyer could actually just literally sole source it to you. They don't need other quotes. They don't need things like that. They can buy from you simply because they might like you. And I can tell you, make a good living at that if that's the case. But it allows you to develop those relationships, and it allows you to understand a department and understand how the federal government works overall. And you kind of learn the personalities. And by the way, every department has a different personality, which is kind of a strange thing to say, but once you get involved, you'd probably understand what I'm saying. One of the great departments Chris touched on is D&D. I got to tell you, my experience with D&D over the 20 some odd years was they love to support their local. They really do. If you're a local supplier, I've never seen a group more committed to supporting the local area. It's almost like a built-in chamber of commerce, and they really do sell or buy everything. So one of the things that I kind of recognized over a period of time when I was actually selling to the feds was the fact that there was what I call three resources that I used over and over and over again. And this is something I actually teach when I do one-on-one coaching. And by the way, PAC across Canada does it. We all do it, and it's a free resource. And I can't even impress upon people. I wish there were these resources 25 years ago, and I wouldn't have become the subject matter expert in doing things wrong. So essentially, and I posted them in the chat, and they're 3 pages, and that's it. There's no 55-page slides to try to remember, and 3 simple pages. I put them in the chat. When I'm talking to folks one-on-one, I actually have them bookmark them and have them on their computer when I'm not there, so to speak. I call it homework. And the very first page is something called the disclosures over 10,000. And this is essentially everything the Canadian federal government has procured since, I think it's around 2009, I believe. And it's everything over $10,000. Anything below 10,000 is typically a credit card purchase. And as Chris alluded to, we did about $700 million or over 2 million transactions in that. So even that's still a huge opportunity. But anything over $10,000 on this page, you can actually go to it, use your keyword searches that would pertain to your industry or product or service. You can even actually, if you don't even know what words you should use, if you know a competitor or somebody who's in the same kind of space or anything, you can actually use them. So what you do is you put it in the keyword search line, and it'll do a search, and it'll bring up all the contracts, and it'll actually highlight the word or the keyword or the company's name that you've used, and it'll give you a list of those contracts. And I explain, you scroll down to finding and just reading them, find one that actually kind of looks like what fits what you're doing. And what you do then is you can actually click on it, and it'll give you more details about that particular contract, like what department bought it, in most cases, who actually bought it from that department. It'll even tell you, was it off of a standing offer? Because even on standing offers, there is still low dollar value that can be applied to that in a lot of cases. And so it gives you, it's a wealth of information to give you kind of like, I call it kind of like a recipe when you're making a soup. You put all these things together. So we have that first page, and it's given us all this information. So we know who the department is. We know who, in most cases, who the buyers. So what do we do now? Well, the second page that I put in there is called GEDS, Government Electronic Directory, which is basically our phone book. And excuse me, everybody in the Canadian federal government is pretty much in there, except for D&D, CSIS, RCMP, obviously for security reasons. But you can still reach out to your PAC, regional PAC office, people like Chris and that, and they'll help you actually find out who to talk to in those departments. So what you can do when you get to this page, when you open it up, it's a generic page. I never really use the first page. I would actually go up and click on where you can, there's a feature where you can actually click on a browse by departments, because if you're going to actually tackle the government, you want to tackle it in a systematic and methodical way. And by going, I literally start at the A's and work my way down. And then so when you get into that, you can actually use words like you can, first of all, you have the department name from the contract you're looking at, so you can go to that department. You can actually use the person's name from that department, and you would actually see where they are in the hierarchy of things. And you can reach out to them and say, hey, here's what I do. And, they can give you advice if it's a supply arrangement, how to get on the supply arrangement. If it was just a simple low dollar value, you've made your relationship. I always say data is gold, and something that's very important with data is you want to track your data. And so there's lots of CRM technologies out there, and I used one called HubSpot, which was free back then. I'm not sure if it still is, but basically it was my honey-do list, I call it. And all I wanted it for was to track who I was talking to when I talked to them, and little notes about them, so that when I develop that relationship and to try to evolve it. So the GEDS is a wonderful, wonderful tool also for research, because I touched on that. You can see where the person is in the hierarchy of the federal government. So you can actually click on and kind of go above them. You can play in there and see, different types of, corporate services, communications, IT, if you're in IT. So you can actually play with that. If you're in the IT world, you can use words like architect, or even even informatics and things like that, or generalize with even just words like procurement and contracting, and you'll get all the folks that are in that space. And so it's a wonderful tool. So I keep that second window open. Then I go to my third window, and my third window is a really cool window. First of all, it's actually a bit of a hint that in terms of what could I sell the government? It's a document called the SOSA, or Standing Offer Supply Arrangement. And it's an Excel spreadsheet. And last time I counted, there was well over 10,000 lines on it. But as I tell people, the hint in what it's all about is in the name, because when the federal government, we actually buy a lot of something, we actually create a supply arrangement or a standing offer for it. It helps procurement people find what they need a lot easier. So right away, you go to this list of over 10,000 lines or contracts, and that's everything we buy. I even recommend at times, when you have some time or you can't sleep, start at line one and work your way down, and just kind of browse through, and you'll see everything we buy a lot of. So that's the key again, a lot of, and you'll also see, we're buying it from. But again, another nice feature of this particular page is you can keyword search again, and that's a wonderful tool. So you can go back, you can use what pertains to your space, your industry. You can also again use if a competitor, that sort of thing. So you can put it in there, and it'll come up. The information that gives you is when it hits that line where your keyword, it'll give you up and above it and below it all the other standing offer or supply arrangement holders in that space. So now you know who your competitors are, and you can actually see if it's a very competitive space. And what I mean by that is like things like pro services, professional services, sometimes have 200 suppliers, and you'll see them in that space. So that's kind of a nice tool that way. But when you can also search all the way across, and you can find out who won that particular supply arrangement, who the supply arrangement number, which is very important, because if there is a supply arrangement in your space and you need to get on that, it's very important that we get that number so we can help you find out when it refreshes or how you get on it. So we can actually help you by coordinating and meeting with, connecting with the actual contracting officer for that particular supply arrangement. So a dearth of information there. Something else, I take it one step further, and each one of these pages I've made reference to, I will actually Google at some point. On page one, when I've been given, I say contract and it's got a competitor's name, I'll actually put it up in Google, and it'll actually tell me a little about that company or whatever. Page two, I really don't get Google up, but page three I certainly do, and I put it up to Google. And it'll actually, when you put that supply arrangement number up in Google, it'll actually tell you more about that particular supply arrangement. Google's a wonderful tool to assist in doing that. And when you take all this together and we kind of back up and we talk about, okay, where and how do I start? Well, again, I can't stress enough. The easiest way is, you wouldn't get a car, you get into a car and, immediately go and not, never driven a car and go on a highway. You would actually, start in the driveway and then, drive around the neighborhood and then go on a highway. To me, the RFP process is like a highway. And you'll have more success when you understand the process and how to get there. And that's what low dollar value does. Again, going back to low dollar value, you can develop those relationships that'll be very important later on as you get along in your journey, because one of the things that I like to stress is, you've heard me say some commodities of 100, 200 suppliers. When you're on that list, procurement people will not, they don't have to go to all 200 suppliers, 100. They'll supply, they'll choose 10 or 15 and go out to them. So it's very, very important that you're proactive as opposed to reactive, and you're constantly reaching out to these folks and just starting to build that relationship, just like you would in the real world. And that'll allow you to kind of get what I call get your feet wet. The great part here is there's folks like myself, Chris, folks all across the country that you can turn to. I call it, we're almost like stress mitigators, because I used to hear people talk about, hey, it's so daunting. And I love this myth busting, because it truly is myth busting. And that's why one of the reasons I was excited to come here, because I tell people, if I can do it, anybody can do it. Really, seriously. It's just a matter of perseverance. And well, you guys are all in university, so PhD, perseverance, hard work, and dedication. And that's it. Just following through the steps and continuing on. We get a lot of folks that reach out, and I'm sure you heard the term "one and done." We'll hear from them once, we never hear from them again. You got to be persistent, and that's why it's key to track where you've been. And there's even a process I discovered in reaching out. We get hundreds of people, like some procurement people get hundreds of people reaching out to them every day. There's no way they'd ever be able to reach out to them. But what they do is they follow up and say, okay, by the second or third time, they go, oh, this person's serious. And I talk about the whole philosophy behind that. In that third touch, you kind of talk to them more in your email about what it is you do. And typically they might not be the exact person, but they'll actually CC in the person. I've got to tell you, in 25 years, I've never had anybody say no. I've never had, yeah, I've heard people say, well, they never get back to me. And I try to explain to them, well, I learned over time, there's a kind of a strategy to that. The media loves to hype things up about, number of government employees. But I got to tell you, since I've been on this side of the fence, the internal folks, the procurement people, they haven't increased them at all. These folks are very good at what they do. Many of them are, they've been there for years and years. Unfortunately, we haven't really expanded what I call the infrastructure or these folks a whole lot. So time is very important to them. So you need to be methodical on how you do that. That's where the procurement teams across Canada, folks like Chris and and myself, we actually will help coach you one-on-one, kind of, just give you the tips and tricks on how to move things forward through. Another thing I've seen a lot of is the fact that in the private sector, they would never even consider doing this, is introductions. Your PAC folks that work in PAC, they'll actually even find out who you need to talk to most of the time and make that introduction. So it really, really does mitigate the stress. And I say to folks, it just didn't exist even 10 years ago, this type of support, but it is today. Chris talked about social procurement, women owned, Black owned. That's all coming, and I work with those folks all the time. I always stress to them, now is the time to get involved, because when all that comes, you'll have got your feet wet, you'll understand the government, you'll understand the process, and it isn't as, I got to tell you, most mid-sized companies are probably even harder to deal with than the government, really. In the government, I just find that you just, once you figure it out, and I love this when I do the coaching, I just get an email back, and it's funny, and it's usually very short, where they go, oh, I got it. So I just laugh at it. I go, see, it wasn't that hard. It's just a matter of, how to start and where to start. And that's where PAC really comes in. And it's been an exciting 2 years so far, and I love this every day. So it's a role that I always tell people that at PAC, we're a little selfish because I think we get a little bit more satisfaction out of helping somebody than you guys do work with us. I get more. I know personally, I get more satisfaction with a sale or something. Actually, a great one I just had recently is a supplier I met about a year ago in Markham, Ontario, and she came up to it, and I worked with her for a few months. She's actually now a speaker at an event we're going to be doing in Oakville, Ontario, within 1 year. And she started out low dollar value and built her way up and got to understand the process. And so she's doing a wonderful job at that. So I could go on, and I know we're probably pressed for time. I put my contact info in there. I know Chris did. I threw the links in there. I don't know if anybody has any questions. If you do, both Chris and myself are here to answer. I'm not sure, Chris, if you want to jump in. I can't see the chat at all. Perhaps you've had a chance to look.
I'm keeping an eye on chat. So if folks want to pop their questions into the chat, if you want to, take some time to think about it, and we still got about 20 minutes here, so plenty of time for some great conversations if people have questions. While we're waiting to see if questions start coming up, I don't know, Barry, if you want to,
sure,
say a little more about Adirondack and sort of how you,
for sure. Okay,
became
so
a successful supplier.
Okay, so I probably, and that's a great segue. Thanks. Yeah, I'll talk about how my journey. Basically, when I started out selling at the time, just selling office supplies, and just somebody gave me the advice: don't try to sell us something new. Sell us what we're already buying. Greatest advice at all I received, and so I started out at that end, and then I got on a supplier list. A standing offer supplier list for furniture, office furniture. And so getting on that list was just another step. It wasn't a competitive list. I call it another business license, but it was on a pre-qualified list. And that's when my journey really started. I started Adirondack from here in the basement of my house. And within, I'm going to say, probably 3 years, we were doing $11 million a year in sales. But again, it was a lot of hard work back and forth. And the way I did that was I didn't go into departments and say, hey, give me your whole, all your business or anything like that. I started out low dollar value. And the best story I love to share is Department of Foreign Affairs. When I reached out to Foreign Affairs, they actually were with another supplier, and it was actually the manufacturer was an American manufacturer. And I went in and just kind of said, hey, one of the common denominators, everybody has a chair. Every department, they use chairs. And so I said, hey, what? We carry chairs too, as well as they're the same chairs. And I said, I like Anywheres for chairs because I also got $75 for delivering the chair. And it got me into the department. It allowed me to talk to people, get to know people, and learn a little bit about the department. So I went from selling them a chair and then to 2 chairs and then maybe a chair and a desk and things like that. And then, hey, Barry, do you guys do any configurations? Configurations are the cubicles that they sit in. And we were a Technion supplier, so we already had installation on licenses to do installs. So yeah, we'd start moving their furniture around and things like that and get to know them a little more. So that went on for about 3 years until the existing contract expired. And then it went up for renewal. And here's where the RFP came in. We bid on it and we won it. And so the process from what I would call 0 to 60 in that case was about 3 years. But over that 3 years, I didn't, it's not we bid on the RFP and lost. We actually had learned enough about the department. We learned about the business. We learned about the competitors. We learned everything to actually really, really give it a shot when it came out for tender. And one of the things that really I kind of rattles me when I hear people say, oh, you know what, I've responded to like 15 tenders, 10 tenders. Believe it or not, I've had one guy say and I don't believe, but he says he responded to 250 tenders with no success. And I'm thinking to myself, well, first of all, that's a definition of insanity. Secondly, there must be a reason here why you're not successful. Well, one of the great things about when you respond to a tender in the federal government is you have the ability, if you're not successful, to ask for a debriefing. And I say to people, debriefings are like a college course, because what happens is, if you know anything about RFPs, there's usually a technical and a financial, and they will actually break down for you on each of those sections and explain to you, you know, what you are lacking or what you need to see more. Most of the time it's pricing, unfortunately, and people don't realize how competitive the federal government is. That's the point. But these debriefings, I tell you, like when you come out of a debriefing, it's like a college course in bidding. It really is. Guarantee if you're really serious, you wouldn't lose the next one, or you'll be very close. So there's no reason to be going 2 or 3 or 4 RFPs with no success. After the first one, you ask. And I used to do things where I'd actually bid on RFPs that were in spaces that I wasn't even in. I just want to find out how that space was because I was considering maybe selling, like marketing into that space. So I would learn it a little bit. Kind of different way to do it, I guess. But depending on what the product was, it wasn't too much paperwork. Because most RFPs, if you look at the first 20 or 30 pages, that's just a template. It's the last few pages that are the meat of the RFP, unless it's things like pro services where you really have to get into like descriptions and things like that. But most goods are pretty, yes, no, pricing, black and white. So it's a good easy way to get in. Again, like I said, if you start small, you'll learn the process of the department. They'll learn you, and that's very important because, like anybody, any procurement, they're risk mitigated. They don't know you, so it's hard to trust you on a big RFP. Just build up that capacity or build up that trust, and then you'll be that much more successful at the other end. It took me 20 some odd years, as I said, but again, and did probably it's probably like 250 to 300 million, close to 300 million. And the reason why I say 200 because somebody can type it in and they can actually verify that. We've gone through three different what I call tendering systems since. So I started out with the Adirondack furniture, and back then, because I was Indigenous, a certain percentage of my staff had to be Indigenous. When it was like 1/3, my mandate was as many as possible. I got up to a little over 80%. The other few percentages were designers, and unfortunately, there's no Indigenous designers, interior design, that sort of stuff. So typically, I had to always hire non-Indigenous, but everybody else was Indigenous, and my installers were Indigenous. My min staff were Indigenous. The first person I hired, she was Indigenous. And cool thing about the first person I hired, when she came to me, she came from a shelter, and her resume was just her name and her phone number, and but I wanted to have that first person to be Indigenous, and it was so amazing to watch her grow over the period of time. A lot of people, they see the in front, they see the business name. Part of my success, I believe, is I told a story. I told what we're about. You support us, this is what we do. And in her situation, 7 or 8 years into it, she came to me and said, "Hey, Barry, I'd like to get 3 weeks off vacation this year." And I'm like, first of all, yeah, for sure. Whatever you want. Like, and I said, "Well, why do you need 3 weeks?" And she said, "Well, I need to drive home. I bought a brand new car, and nobody in my family has ever had a new car before." And I thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And people still ask me, what's one of the most, and that to me is what we were all about. That to me is what business is all about. Yeah, it's tough keeping the lights on some days and things, but you know what? When you can make changes in people's lives, that's a huge difference. And so doing that, when I'd go to departments and stuff, I would talk about us. I would talk about why we're different. I call it the why us, and I'm sure you guys have all heard that before. Why we're different is we make this effort to find people that are marginalized. Like I said, most of my installers were all Indigenous, and they're usually coming from some sort of program or something. One of the greatest thing that happened was during the foreign affairs years, actually it was shortly after that, our American friends did us a favor and got caught. They were bugging Angela Merkel's cell phone, Chancellor of Germany. And I immediately took it upon myself to reach out to all the ambassadors around for Canada, around the world, and say, hey, you know what? If they can bug Angela Merkel's cell phone, what do you think they could do with a workstation that has 4,000 pieces? And immediately we ended up getting contracts for Paris, London, Madrid. These guys that my installers, most of them hadn't ever been out of Ottawa. If even, Ottawa was a big, they ended up getting to travel to places like Paris, London, and places. Unfortunately, I didn't get to go. They did. And so that's the kind of thing that I like the story of. And, and as I grew across Canada, I would go to events, and I was always looking for people to bring on who are Indigenous. And the craziest part of that was, I call it a happenstance event happened. We got so busy in getting resumes and Indigenous people, and we were introducing them, we turned it into a business, and we spun a staffing company out of that, and Adirondack HR, and that was in 2006. In 2015, that's when we shut the furniture business down. There wasn't a lot of what I call bricks and mortar, so really it was just a transition of somebody else taking it over, and they took the staff on. And in 2021, I sold the staffing company, which is still running today, actually. And coincidentally, I don't know what's a coincidence or not, but it's a whole lot bigger than it was when I left it. So that might be I don't know. Maybe I was holding it back, but it's doing wonderful. Same, it's to see stuff like that still going and be successful is a lot of fun. But now I get to share all those tips and tricks and what kind of worked and what didn't work, because a lot of people think, well, what, I know my member of parliament, and they go to that member of parliament way, and we see this all the time. And yeah, and they end up, after about 6 months or a year of doing all that circle, they end up back at us, where they should have been in the first place. And that time they would have had a lot of business. Like, and I talk to people that one thing that we forget, or we sometimes overlook, when we search, people buy from people. They really do. And when you get a chance to chat with these buyers or procurement people, talk about life, talk about why you're different, talk about, your interests and things like that. That's how you develop the relationships for procurement people. And they're the people that you got to differentiate yourself, because, as I said, when there's lists of 50, 100 suppliers, it's impossible to choose all 50 or 100 when they're going for a call up. They'll do 10, 5. I've seen 3. So out of sight, out of mind. One of the greatest things that ever happened to me was, like, you heard me touch on this HubSpot. Well, I think it was like 8 or 9 years in, maybe 10. They came up with this little technology switch that allowed me to actually reach out to all my contacts and say, hey, and by the way, it didn't say HubSpot on the reach out, it said my email address. And it would just automatically every 3 months go, hey, how you doing? It's Barry. Just wanted to see how things are going. And, if I see if I can help you, if you can, give me a call. It was crazy how many people would actually respond to that email, that kind of stuff. We just need to differentiate ourselves from the next people. And one of the things I like to talk about is, if you're going to get into a market that everybody else is in, it becomes very competitive. Office supplies, pro services, those are the main ones. Office furniture, the margins sometimes in those are so low, and there's usually some sort of ulterior motive for them. What I mean by that is, you see these office supply, when they're big companies, the Staples, Granite Toys, and things. Sometimes they'll actually go in at zero margin because it's a basket of goods. But where they make their money is on all the other stuff. So there's a strategy that you can take into consideration when you're looking at that. And I certainly learned that over the years. I talk to people about that today. If it's a low dollar value, great thing about low dollar value, up to $25,000. You can make some serious margin in there, and some great opportunity. One of the stories I talk about, somebody who was really successful in that arena that you'll never find, was, I was, unloading office furniture and these panels and doing offices and stuff. There'd be this gentleman who would show up in a van. This is around 2004, 2005, I first read it then. And he had this van, he'd show up in a van, and he had these chairs, these called Herman Miller Aeron, which are ergonomic. Back then they were like $2,500 a chair. He made about $500 a chair after I talked to him. And he'd wheel these 3 or 4 chairs into the lobby of the building, never break a sweat. He'd call upstairs to, an ADM or a deputy minister or a manager or director, their assistants, the folks that were doing all the work of typing and things like that. And he'd invite them down and show them all the ergonomic benefits of this chair. And they would then call upstairs to their boss and go, hey, this chair is amazing. For my back, my posture. The boss would say, put it on my credit card. Every time I saw that guy, he sold 2, 3, 4 chairs a day. And I'm thinking to myself, that guy's probably living in the Cayman Islands right now, and he's not on any list anywhere because he was below the $10,000 threshold. Like, he was making $500 a chair back then. That's a lot of money. And again, he just found a niche. He stayed below what I call the radar, the $10,000. And sometimes went up when, if you think the 25,000, if you're a caterer or, any type of coaching or even an IT, any sort of service, with IT services go up to 40,000. That's a serious opportunity. You can actually make a good living in that space without ever having to go up an RFP against the big boys. Like it says, the big boys have a strategy usually, and the big boys, big girls, I guess, but the Deloittes, Accentures, all those folks of the world, they have an ulterior motive half the time or 90% of the time. So it's very tough. Stay within a space, stay within a lane, and it organically grows on its own, because one thing that happens in the government is, we touched about risk aversion. Procurement people talk to procurement people. They'll say, hey, call this person. Hey, call this person. Once you develop a good relationship and reputation like that, it's much easier. And again, you're not bumping into these huge relationships. Back in the day, I used to have to, bump into these relationships against the big boys who, they'd be taking people out for lunch. I couldn't afford to do that. I had to do it a different way. So what I did was I focused on what was almost their scraps, but I made more money focusing on that margin wise than I would have by chasing the big stuff. So there's a lot of methodology to it, a lot of philosophy to it, a lot of strategy. But the great thing is, when you go to low dollar value, it's pretty simple stuff, and it allows you to kind of learn, allows you to make errors, because all of us are going to make errors, or I call them lessons, but it's much easier to correct that lesson at a low dollar value than it is on a big contract, and that's the point. Typically on something small, you have a bit of a hiccup, the procurement officer is going to go with it, right? They're, oh, okay, no worries, right? Because it's not a big deal, and that's where you really learn the whole kind of how the government buys things. And then once you learn all this, and if you're new in sales, then you go to the private sector. I was able to leverage my experience from the federal government back out into the provincial government, and ended up winning a bid for the natural resources building here in Peterborough. So where I had the national defense as a reference, had RCMP as a reference, and CRA as a reference. That's what's great about it. You can use the federal government as a reference to go outside. So even into the private sector, we got it to the RBCs, the Bank of Montreal, all these corporate entities, but we were able always to point back and go, we have the federal government as a reference. Great tool to have in your toolbox, where you can say, I sell to the federal government. People are going to talk to you then. They're going to give you an opportunity. And again, even when you get out there, start out small, right? Because you're up against relationships. And that's the great thing about low dollar value. And Chris touched on, I think you said 37 billion, Chris, but ours is around 24, 25 billion. Think 90% of 25 billion. That's a lot of money. And that's 90%, that's under 20K, 25K. That's insane. So while everybody else is chasing the big guy, big dog, there's way more money to be made. 90% more, at the other end, we do. So that's why I kind of focus on people, and that's, to me, where you want to start, really. And again, we help you. PAC helps you. We have region, folks all across Canada. One of the great things I've seen at PAC and they've been helpful for me, is we actually have a team chat board. And being with the government only a couple of years, most of the time I'm wrong about something in terms of philosophy or policy and stuff. I throw it up on that chat board. I have an answer within 10 minutes. Which is incredible. And I've actually said to our team, we should make this public, but I think it would get inundated. So the resources are incredible. There's somebody to help you at every turn. The stress mitigation it goes down tremendously. And again, it's, it's not that big engine that you think it is. It's people talk to people buy from people, and the support is there. So I don't know if any questions yet. Quiet crowd.
Yeah, we haven't got any questions yet, but we do have 5 minutes left here before I think we're the last stop before lunch. So I can imagine
We're
there's going to
holding
be some
people
folks
up
who
for
want.
lunch.
But
That's always
yeah,
a good spot to be.
that's
Okay.
right.
Yeah, no
So
worries.
yeah, if anybody has questions, we're here for the next couple of minutes, but I threw in the contact info for myself as well as for all the regional offices for PAC. So if you're joining virtually and you're not in the Western region, there are resources all across the country for you to reach out to. So there's definitely folks willing to help, as Barry has mentioned here. So yeah, we're still we'll kick around here for a couple more minutes, but feel free to throw in questions if you got them, or reach out if you're shy through email or something like that, or a phone call, and we're happy to help.
Well, we know we have people in the room. We can see the numbers, but I guess really shy.
There we go. Hey, we've got a question. So our architectural services part of procurement. So
Ooh.
yes, absolutely. Architectural services are a big part of what we do. A lot of them fall under the professional services branch of doing procurement. So there's a few different ways you can tackle architectural services. I strongly recommend taking part in one of our supplying professional services to the Government of Canada free seminars. Gets into a little bit more detail, but happy to have a one-on-one with you as well to kind of deep dive into that. I'm not sure, Barry, if you've got some
Well, actually, I was just going to ask you a question. That's a good one, right? Architectural services. Correct me if I'm wrong. 25,000 for goods, 40,000 for services. Isn't architectural services like 100 or something like that?
$100,000 for architectural and construction services.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
so imagine how exciting that is. I've only been talking 25 and 40. Architectural goes to 100.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
even more so a reason to, right? Even more reason to make those relationships and connections, right?
Yep.
And again, whoever that was asking that question, yeah, you have to be on the supplier pro services supply arrangement, and we help you kind of navigate on how to do that. So it's not that challenging, really.
Yeah, for anybody who's interested in doing the pro services and signing up on we call it our centralized professional services e-portal, CPSS. It's an old website. You need some help to go through that website, and I'm happy to set aside an hour a day to help folks navigate that website. So definitely reach out.
I think we're any question? No.
Down to 2 more minutes. I think we're probably I've received some emails of things like that. So I think we're probably going to be okay here on questions, unless anybody's got anything kind of last second. But I'm going to put one more plug in for the Procurement Assistance Canada event calendar. I put the link in the chat. Please come by and stop by some of our sessions. They're totally free. We're doing sessions coast to coast every day. I think right now, between now and the end of July, we have 74 sessions. Last time I looked at our calendar. So if you do happen to miss one, chances are it's coming up the very next week or within a week or two anyway. So please feel free to come along and learn a little bit more. They do kind of go in order, but depending on your familiarity with government procurement, you may be able to jump in right in the middle. So, but yeah, I think that's probably about it. I think we got about 1 minute left. So thank you everybody for coming, and thanks again to ScaleUp for inviting us. And yeah, hopefully we talk to you all soon.
Thanks for inviting me, Chris. This was fun. I love doing these things. Gives me a chance to chat about other stuff. Appreciate the time, everyone.
All right. Okay. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk soon.
Take care now. All right. Bye-bye now.